Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Catherine Mattice Sundell. Welcome to Catherine's Corner. I'm the CEO and founder of Civility Partners. Of course, we work towards building positive work environments. And I am so honored today to have Eva Gemzøe Mikkelsen with me. I started researching workplace bullying in graduate school back in around 2005. And so, of course, read her name and several other sort of famous researchers. I consider them famous researchers in the world of workplace bullying. And so I'm so excited to have her here with me today to talk about workplace bullying. And you've got a really cool background, one that I sort of try to emulate a little bit. So Eva is a professor at the University of Southern Denmark, and she's been researching workplace bullying since the mid-90s. And she also was a full-time consultant for 16 years, and then has recently gone back to being a professor in organizational psychology. So again, thank you so much, Eva, for being here with me today.
Thank you. I have to correct you, I'm sorry, because, hierarchy at universities is important, and I'm an associate professor, not a professor.
Well, sorry, you're a superstar in my mind, so that's all I think about. So I think it would be interesting. One thing I get asked a lot is kind of like, what are some of the craziest things you've seen, or most profound things or appalling things that you've seen? So I was curious to hear about that from you, whether in the research or in your work as a consultant. What are some of the things that you see?
Well, I've got both a consultant hat, and I've got a researcher hat. And I think I'll put the researcher hat on first. And I think that I would focus on go back in time and then focus on health consequences of bullying, because I think was what brought me into this field, that workplace bullying can be actually a traumatic experience. So long time ago, at the Department of Psychology in Aarhus here in Denmark, I was studying psychology. And I was actually specializing in psychotraumatology, research in post-traumatic stress disorder, the effects of all traumatic events like rape or natural disasters, war, torture, etc. And then I just had to take this really tedious course on work and organizational psychology. I thought it was really boring, but we were introduced to a case on the conflicts at work, and it was actually from a Norwegian book on bullying. And reading this case, it just struck me. I was shocked, actually, that the targets, perhaps I should say, the losers of these workplace conflicts, they displayed symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. So I think, what? Is that actually possible, that you can go to work and you can develop these really, really terrible symptoms of post-traumatic stress? So that sort of got me interested in the subject, and I decided to do my thesis on workplace bullying. And there was actually, I think there was one thesis before me in Denmark, but in Norway and in Sweden, they were, quite upfront and doing a lot of research. So I did my thesis, and after that I applied for a PhD. I was really lucky that I got it. And one of the studies that I did, you might have read that, was on basic assumptions and post-traumatic stress among 118 victims of bullying. And the result of this study, the design of the study was not too great compared to the studies we got today, but it still showed that 76% of these 118 targets of bullying displayed severe symptoms of post-traumatic stress. So I think that was really, really shocking. And after that, in our field of research, we've had much better studies, prospective studies showing that yes, workplace bullying is a risk factor for developing post-traumatic stress disorder and depression and burnout and anxiety and suicidal ideation.
Mhm.
So it is a really traumatic, it is a potentially traumatic event. And as you know, that there's also legal aspects of this. For example, in Denmark, for many years, you haven't been able to get sort of, what's the word? If you took it to court, through the work environment court that we've got, you know, they said, well, I'm sorry, you know, you cannot, post-traumatic stress disorder and bullying, it just doesn't fit because bullying, workplace bullying is not a traumatic event. So I was also sort of into all of this, but just recently, as we heard at the conference, there was a one Danish target of bullying who was actually, you know, I think she got something about 300,000 euros. But this
Mhm.
post-traumatic stress, this was actually what shocked me as a
Mhm.
researcher.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then I could also take my
I want to hear the consulting hat.
practitioner
There
hat
are
on
many
then. So
workplace
off we
bullying.
go.
Yeah, there are many of us who consult in workplace bullying, so I want to hear about that too. What are some of the things
Yeah. I
as a
think
consultant?
when I take my consultant hat on, I think maybe I haven't, you know, I've been in this field for a long time. I've had cases for many years. So I know that this is difficult. It's difficult for organizations to address. It's a lot of managers are not prepared. I could also say that compared to back in the mid 90s, a lot of Danish organizations are much more focused on harassment and workplace bullying. A lot of them have bullying policies. They never had that. When I was doing sort of lectures 20 years ago, I would ask people to raise their hand if you've got a bullying policy, and absolutely nobody had one. They do today.
Right.
And also the Danish work environment authorities, they're quite focused on this, and a lot of the sort of in Denmark, there's a lot of organizations focusing and working on ameliorating the work environment. And a lot of these organizations are sort of have both manager representatives and employee representatives. So it's quite sort of geared towards this. But there's still, and this is, I find, disturbing in a way still, that a lot of organizations are very ill prepared when for example, there are reports of workplace bullying or sexual harassment in a work environment survey, or if there's an allegation of bullying. Some just think, oh God, we can't deal with this. Others try, others and just do a terrible job. So I think this is an area that we need more organization to focus on and to realize we need to prioritize that. We need to build up our ethical infrastructures. We have to have policies that work, that everybody knows of, and we have to have work environment representatives and managers who have the skills to do this. And I think what is great about Denmark is that in a lot of organizations, we do have this working together of employees, representatives, and also managers. And this is a good thing. And when this collaboration works, then they're usually able to address these, sometimes with the help of an external consultant or internal consultants, you know, HR.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would also like to pose the question to you. I mean, what is your experience? Because we're sitting in different parts of the world, and we've discussed this also with the book chapter we're working on, you know, the differences between Denmark and your state and the States.
Yeah, so I'm in an interesting spot because I'm in California. So, you know, we are known for being very employee friendly and really wanting to make sure employees are feeling valued and dignified and not being taken advantage of. So our laws generally exceed kind of the rest of the states. We have a handful of states that require harassment prevention training, but you know, I don't know why everybody thinks training solves problems. That's not helpful. So, and just the fact that as little as training can solve a problem, it's still disheartening that only a few states have this requirement that you have to do the training around harassment. And it's sad to me, one of the appalling things that I find is that I have to convince a C-suite or the CEO that this has costs, because the people part of it, the hurt and the damage to the people doesn't seem to be enough. It has, and so that always hurts my soul a little bit, that the ones that I'm kind of selling to, of like, look, this is costing you money. I hate that I have to have that conversation. I wish they would just say, this is terrible. I'm sad that my people feel this way. Let's fix it. So that's something that's appalling to me. And I've watched, lots of different states have tried to pass laws. And I've watched some of those hearings where they're, the legislatures are talking about it. And of course, a lot of them are white male, and so that may be part of it too. Maybe they haven't experienced bullying, so they talk about things like, we can't influence or legislate incivility, or people can be rude, that's fine. And so there's clearly a disconnect between what we're trying to pass or what we're trying to make laws around versus incivility. So it's that's hard to watch too. So we have some comments. One person says, I used to support my dissertation on workplace incivility. So I'm assuming he's talking about you, Eva, not me. And he says, sometimes they justify incivility. Yeah, so I agree with all of the things that you said too. Organizations are ill prepared to solve this problem. Managers need to be trained on solving people problems early on before they escalate. There's just so much work to be done here. And I also, it's neat to hear you talk about what the law, the laws and this kind of authority that you have, the workplace authority. I feel like our paradigm is shifting because of the millennials, coming in and finding a better work environment. And I don't know, it's just interesting to watch there's pressure on organizations to create a better work environment because of things like Glassdoor. I don't know if you have that in Denmark, but employees can talk about how they were treated in the workplace. And so, of course, employers want to make sure they're being talked about in a good way on something like Glassdoor. So I don't know, I guess that's fascinating to me as well, that it's really from the pressure of employees rather than because employers want to do the right thing that we're making changes, So
I think we definitely need more research on the economic costs of workplace bullying. I've got a friend that she's a co-author of one of the books that I've written, and her daughter is an economist, and she did some research on it. We do need more, because we know as consultants, we know that this has effects. People are afraid of, for example, criticizing each other. This is very tightly linked to the whole psychological safety or psychological safety climate, and in an organization with bullying, if you're not able to, or if you don't feel that you can address bullying or say no to something, address incivility or harassment, you would also probably feel that you have this sort of fear that if you address it or if you say something, then the organization will not take it seriously. So it's very tightly linked to this. We need more research on the economical effects of this, and you just have to read the books and on the organizational consequences. They're huge.
Yeah.
But not to mention just losing fantastic employees. I've really met managers who say, well, you can just hire a new one, but just getting a new employee, especially if it's a key employee, then you lose a lot of, for example, customers, or you lose a lot of that person's knowledge. So I think we need, but I also think, I don't know whether you listened to Pramila De Cruz's keynote at our IAWBH conference just last week.
I haven't had a chance.
Yeah, she's addressed, the whole sort of systemic, the whole the bullying that we're usually addressing and talking about and researching and working with as consultant is the traditional face-to-face interpersonal bullying. Whereas she's done a lot of research in India on the so-called depersonalized bullying, where bullying is not really, somebody bullying me as an employee, but bullying all the employees in order to maximize profit, in order to make people work more. So it's more a systemic aspect, and I think this phenomenon touches a lot. You can have good workplaces where you just accidentally hire the psychopath, or and then hopefully you get rid of this person quickly. But in many organizations, this is also linked to how what focus you do have on. If you're super focused on maximizing profit and everybody's working hard all the time, they get stressed. No time to talk about work environment matters, or in the extreme cases or cases as Pramila and Ernesto have addressed, it's this whole systemic, you pressure your employees for them to maximize profit, and do that by means of bullying.
Yep. Going back to the most appalling thing I've seen, one is it was a call center that did collections for auto loans, and so people default on their auto loans, and this company would call and try to get people to pay. So naturally their job is a little bit of bullying, because that's what they do. The collections call and sort of bully you into paying your bill. But they had contacted me because they'd had a suicide, and this person's suicide note talked about the workplace and other things, but also the workplace and how they were treated. And the HR representative was telling me, just given their role and what they're doing and the way they just mistreat each other, and just there's this whole culture of terrible bullying each other. They're being pressured to collect money and all this stuff. And they get an email from the kind of higher up HR person, and she said that leadership had told her it wasn't a priority to address the culture. And I just, that felt, I cried, because here this person had been so traumatized that they had committed suicide, and it was exactly what you're talking about. Just the whole culture was like that, and so it was sad that they didn't address it. So speaking of organizations, I think a lot of times HR especially really point or goes straight to the source. It's a people problem. It's you doing this behavior and you're the target of it, and who saw it. But the organization plays a big role as well. So what are some of the things you've seen where the organization's actually facilitating this behavior?
Well, we know from research, 30 years of research, even more, actually starting from the American psychiatrist, I think he was, Carol Brodsky. He did his work on the harassed worker. Is just a fantastic seminal work. But we know that work environment factors pose a risk for workplace bullying, perhaps less for sexual harassment, but still. And especially factors such as role ambiguity, role conflict, job insecurity, also I think work pressure to a certain extent, and of course poor leadership, tyrannical leadership, and laissez-faire leadership. And I think as a consultant, I've met a lot more laissez-faire leaders, managers, than tyrannical authoritarian managers. But also to work environment factors and the work environment hypothesis, because for some years and still in a lot of places, I think this is an individual problem. We know from research that it is basically a work environment or cultural problem. Basically, this is what research points to. Of course, there are different things related to individuals. How do you react to conflicts, and how do you perceive things? But basically, work environment and conflict. For example, if a poor work environment conflict, that can create a lot of stress. And if I'm super, super stressed, I might sort of violate norms of, how one should do my work, and how social I should be with all the others, because I'm so busy working. So others might actually sanction me or start to bullying me because I violate norms of, the quality of work and how to perform in our team, or how to also act socially. For example, you go out every Friday for a beer or a drink or a coffee or something. And also another sort of thesis or theory about it is that if you do have this like poor work environment, people get super frustrated and then they ventilate aggression. That. But also, of course, we must point to cultural factors. For example, high performance cultures. We just, talked about them before. And also these sort of very macho organizations with hierarchy, with macho ideals. This is also organizations where you find these initiation rituals. And for example, I think the paper on the Royal Canadian Mounted Police or Mounted Police, they have this kind of culture, really, really macho culture. You can find it some in the police force or in the military. But what I've seen most in the cases I've got in Denmark, it is shyness or avoidance of conflict. This is, I think, in 98% of all the cases I've had, and most of them have been conflict related, is that people or employees and or managers are really avoiding addressing conflictual issues. And once the conflict is there, they don't deal with it. And also lack of feedback, a lack of ability to use feedback in behavior, for example, on civility. We have no tradition. For example, if we were colleagues and you said something to me that I found was offensive, I don't know how to express it. And people will not help me, and the bystanders will not help me. So this also a lack of feedback culture. This is two key points that I've seen in many of the cases that I have. So I think it's really important. It's also an important message, and I'm sure you say it to the managers that you work with, don't focus on the person. Maybe there are some people, individuals, you also work with that, Catherine, who need to be coached to be able to be a better manager. But basically, this is an organizational problem. And this is also why we should, when we investigate, not look for individuals in particular, but look for organizational risk factors and strive to develop organizations using sort of process consultation in our consultancy, in my opinion.
Well, let's talk about investigations, because at least here in America or in California, the investigation is very focused on the facts. So for example, I just read an investigator's report the other day for it was around this person that I'm now going to be coaching. And it is very focused on, okay, the person who complained, here's what she said happened. And then the investigator talked to 3 other people who also say, yes, he does that. And so it's all very focused on the facts of the matter in order to sort of, investigations are about proving or disproving that something happened so that we can decide, did this person violate the law and what is the appropriate consequence for that? And so in this case, the appropriate consequence is coaching. He didn't do anything too terrible, but his behavior is disruptive. Versus how do we, so are you able, when you're doing investigations, to talk about the organizational risk factors? Is that part of your investigation? Yeah. Okay.
I've never done this sort of criminal fact-finding focused, has there been bullying or not? The way I have these cases is that once I've signed a contract with an organization, I will usually, in 99% of the cases, I do an investigation, or rather more an assessment by means of individual interviews. And these interviews are a general mapping of the work environment, of the culture at the workplace, and also, of course, of previous conflicts, existing conflicts, and of bullying. So I would, and these interviews usually last 1.5 hours. And it's just a conversation. I've got this interview guide that I always use, starting with, hearing, what are you doing? And what is your work day? And who do you collaborate with? How is your manager? Anything that this manager does is good or bad? What advice would you give to him? Feedback culture, as I said before, previous conflicts, how these have been managed, the existing conflicts, and what people are, disagree about, how well they think they're doing the work, the sort of primary task of the organization, do they agree? This is a key conflict theme in many of these conflict-related bullying cases. So based on this, I analyzed this using thematic analysis. I don't transcribe everything. I don't record anything. It's a consultant-based analysis. And I will then give a feedback to first management, maybe HR, and then later to the employees. And the focus of this is really to pinpoint the work environment, the cultural factors, and then do some kind of analysis of this case. And also perhaps to find out which kind of bullying is it. Is it conflict-related bullying, predatory bullying? Is it a humor issue? Is it more systemic bullying? And then I will, of course, also based on that, I will ask in the interviews, if you have to solve this, what do you think should be done? And they're usually, many places, they will say, well, my manager should be fired, or this should be fired. And I say, well, if that cannot happen, what then should be done? So this sort of feedback from the employees is also integrated in the feedback, first to management, and also with my recommendations. So this is actually the first phase. And then, of course, also if I was an expert, I would just deliver this as the right analysis. But at back meetings, I would say to them, have a talk, just 5-10 minutes, two, and just see if this, I usually say, it's a Danish expression, is this as a city in Russia or a small town in Russia, meaning you cannot recognize it, or is it actually your workplace? So when they verify my analysis, this is a good fundament for then working in a process-oriented, organizational development-oriented, and I've actually solved cases without using the word bullying.
Oh, wow.
So I'm not really, of course, sometimes I have to give a feedback saying these persons have a problematic behavior. I've also had cases that resulted in managers or employees being fired. But usually the way I approach this is not to look for problematic individuals, but to look for the organization that created this situation, and then help managers, assist managers and employee representatives in changing these risk factors, and also not being too much expert in them, but trying to get them to address this, trying to get them to work so that they're more prepared and perhaps will never be in this situation again.
Yeah, we do similar work. We do surveys, and then we also interview employees. And that investigation that you just described, that's required. Am I right, by the law, or is this something that organizations choose to do?
Both. If in Denmark there are the Arbejdstilsynet, the work environment authorities, they go out on sort of the supervising, just arrive. Sometimes they say to a company, we'll arrive within the next 2 months, one day, and then they interview people. And then if they have some kind of suspicion that there's a problem, then you can get an enforcement order to hire a consultancy, authorized consultancy company to try and find out, is there a bullying in this place? Sometimes also it's, I'm not super into if there's any sort of new changes into that, but it used to be the way that then you could also get an enforcement order saying you have to do something about this. So I've had several of such cases. So this is, and quite often it's helpful. I've had organizations saying, oh God, we have to object. And I'm just saying, don't. take this as a chance for you to do something. And actually later on, the manager say, oh, thank God we got this. But other organizations, they do just have like work environment surveys, and then they see there's a problem, and then they would call me, call others, and say, we would like to find out what this is. Because, and often perhaps they've said, oh no, this is a huge problem. And the CEO would stand up on a chair and say, we don't want bullying or sexual harassment in our organization. Please come to me. The door is always open. We will help you. And due to low psychological safety, I said low, then they will not come.
They don't.
And then they know what to do. And then sometimes they call the external consultants.
Right. So that's what's a major difference here, is that here it's just that fact-finding mission. In fact, you either have to be a private investigator, lawyer, to be able to do those types of investigations. And it's so focused on the facts and criminalizing like a detective would, who murdered who, you know, and or who murdered this person. Let's detect and get our detective hats on. So this assessment that you're doing, and that's similar to the work that I do, it's all extra. You know, it has to be that the CEO has decided, I'm interested in knowing this. And usually that doesn't happen until something horrible has happened. For example, the organization I talked about in my speech at our conference that we just did, you know, the only reason they hired somebody and hired was that some women came forward during Me Too and really went public with their stories. And the central HR, this was at a university, had it had been like a year or months from this to do this investigation that I'm describing, this fact-finding mission. Of course, that person the woman was kind of the leader of it. Of course she's angry, and good for her for cornering the organization by going public, because now they need to be able to respond to these public stories about the organization. And so, you know, that they were forced into it by that. But I wish, so that's a lot to talk about at other conferences when I'm speaking, you know, that fact-finding thing, I get you have to do it, but there's so much more to understand. I wish investigators would take into consideration the organization itself and what risk factors do they uncover as they're investigating, and they just don't. And that's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah, it is. And because as is my experience, 20 years of consultancy, that it is mostly the organization, work environment factors, cultural factors that facilitate this, that acts as sort of fundament for these negative behaviors to either appear or not to be addressed. And we need to educate, we need to work together with the organizations, with the managers at all levels, for them to be able to address this and to see this as a risk. It's a risk. It's a risk for sick leave, for low productivity, for lack of sharing of knowledge, of important knowledge, so that you can actually perhaps avoid catastrophes in different aspects. So it's really something that we wish that more organizations would focus on. And of course, not to mention the human suffering due to this. I mean, lives have been destroyed literally, but also lives and families have been destroyed due to workplace bullying. And I must admit, and I might sort of venture into dangerous ground, is that I think a long time ago I interviewed a nurse, and after the phone, after I stopped recording, she said, "Don't say this, but every day I drive by his house, I just wished I had a gun so I could go in and shoot him. I would never do that." So I'm thinking some of these shootings that are in different countries and also in yours, unfortunately, what has happened if it's a workplace shooting? What has happened before that? So this is the sort of the most extreme result that could happen in some cases, but other effects that are highly related to the products that we are selling, that we're using, that we're giving, the service we're giving, these should be addressed, and they should be aware.
Yeah. It's so sad when, I mean, I've done my interviews when I've been doing assessments as well, and sometimes I hang up the phone and cry because of the story that I'm a crier. But the story that they've shared and how damaged they are, sometimes you can just feel the energy, like the damage that's been done because of their experience. And I have one story of, I had done a training at an organization, and this woman, I just remember as she was walking toward me, sounds hokey, but I could just kind of feel this cloud around her. And I sort of, as she's walking toward me, I'm entering into this cloud that she has around her. Just the energy of anger and hurt and damage was so strong. And it's like, how do organizations miss that or not care about that? I mean, you could just see in her face that she's damaged by all of this. So it's sad that we have to convince organizations to care about people. And some organizations do, but many don't. So
yeah, I think a lot of organizations do in Denmark, but they really sort of tuned into this now, but they still need to be educated and to prioritize this, to focus on this. And just I was just thinking many years ago when I was interviewing people who were in my research projects, I remember sometimes I had to call their home. And I could just feel from, that could be the husband or the child or the wife replying, and I could just feel that the whole family was in huge crisis.
Yeah.
So this has huge effects also on significant others. And of course, also colleagues. We should do that another time, where we should talk about the bystanders.
Yes.
Or the upstanders, and as I think you call them, the bystanders that, play a huge role in this, and something that I'm researching on and doing interventions in bystanding. And I think that's really, really important to focus them on as well.
Yeah.
They're the third force.
We're way past our time. So what I'm going to do is email you, and we're going to set up a part 2, because there is so much to say around that as well. And I know you've done some work there, and I've done some work there. So it'll be neat to compare notes. And we have some great comments. Paul, thanks for listening in. And is it Tyne? Hopefully I'm saying your name right. The object of the intervention is a healthy work environment. Therefore, we must consider how the intervention design supports a trustful and learning work environment. That is right. So investigation, that here in the States, is not an intervention. It's a fact-finding mission. So I hope we can get to more where you are. So thank you again, Eva. I really appreciate your support. And like I said, you're, in my mind, a superstar and kind of famous in our little tiny world of workplace bullying research. So I just I'm in awe of all the work that you do, and honored to get to chat with you. So thank you.
Likewise, and thank you for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure, as always, talking to you. So looking forward to seeing you face to face, hopefully next year. So
yes, and I know, right? And just by the way, for those listening, the conference we've been referencing, there's actually an international association on workplace bullying and harassment. We just had a conference. It's where Eva and I and lots of other researchers and practitioners hang out and talk about bullying and harassment. So we'll post a comment there. We're doing a conference next year here in San Diego. So woohoo! It'll be fun. And let's finish our book chapter too. We're pretty close.
We must. Yeah.
All right. Thank you again. I appreciate it.